The studio lights blaze like 1,000 suns, casting a golden glow over the set. The air is thick with anticipation. Millions of eyes are glued to their screens, waiting for the moment to unfold. This isn't just another interview. It's a showdown. At the center of it all sits Richard Caldwell, the veteran TV host. His reputation precedes him. Known for his sharp tongue and relentless questioning, Richard has made even the most powerful figures stumble under the glare of his spotlight. Tonight, he has a new target: Barron Trump. Barron steps onto the stage, tall and composed. He's not just another guest, he's a mystery. The youngest son of a polarizing political dynasty, Barron has always stayed out of the limelight, but tonight, he's stepping into it willingly. The audience murmurs as Barron takes his seat. He's calm, almost unnervingly so. No fidgeting, no nervous glances. His dark suit is impeccably tailored, his posture straight but relaxed. He looks at Richard with steady eyes, ready for whatever comes his way. Richard leans forward, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Welcome, Barron," he begins, his voice smooth but laced with challenge. "This is an interview a lot of people have been waiting for." Barron nods slightly, his expression unreadable. "I'm sure they have," he replies, his voice calm and measured. The tension in the room is palpable. Richard's eyes gleam with the sharp anticipation of a predator who's just spotted his prey. He's prepared for this moment, armed with carefully crafted questions designed to unravel Barron in front of the world. But there's one thing Richard doesn't know yet. Barron isn't someone who unravels easily. The audience leans in, eager to see what happens next. They expect hesitation, maybe even a stumble. But what they're about to witness will leave them stunned. What would you do if you were in Barron's position? Would you be nervous, or would you face the challenge head-on? Let us know in the comments. The studio is silent, save for the faint hum of the cameras. Richard Caldwell adjusts his notes, his eyes narrowing slightly as he prepares to begin. He's known for starting soft, luring his guests into a false sense of security before striking with tougher questions. Tonight is no different. "Barron," Richard begins, his tone almost casual. "You've managed to stay out of the spotlight for most of your life. Why now? Why this interview?" Barron leans back slightly, his hands resting calmly on the armrests of his chair. He doesn't rush to answer. Instead, he takes a moment, his piercing blue eyes meeting Richard's. "I don't seek the spotlight," he says, his voice steady. "But I don't run from it either." Richard raises an eyebrow, intrigued. "Fair enough. But let's be honest, people don't really know you. They've seen you in photos, maybe caught a glimpse of you at events, but you've never spoken for yourself. So, who is Barron Trump?" The question hangs in the air, heavy and loaded. The audience holds its breath, waiting for Barron's response. This is the moment Richard has been waiting for, the first test. Barron doesn't flinch. He tilts his head slightly as if considering the question. "Maybe tonight," he says, his voice calm but firm. "They'll find their own answer." Richard's smirk falters for a fraction of a second. He wasn't expecting that. Barron's response is neither defensive nor evasive. It's confident, almost daring Richard to dig deeper. The host quickly recovers, leaning forward slightly. "All right, let's start with something simple. You were born into a family name that everyone knows, a name tied to power, wealth, and controversy. Has that ever felt like a burden?" Barron clasps his hands together, his expression thoughtful. "Pressure is a part of life," he says. "But what matters more is how you face it." The audience murmurs, impressed by the young man's poise. Richard narrows his eyes, sensing that this won't be as easy as he thought. He presses on. "But growing up in a family like yours, did you ever feel disconnected from the real world?" It's a trap. If Barron says no, he risks sounding out of touch. If he says yes, he admits to living in a bubble of privilege. The audience leans in, eager to see how he'll respond. Barron doesn't hesitate. "Everyone grows up in their own bubble, Richard," he says, his voice measured. "The question isn't where you were raised. It's whether you have the courage to step outside of it." The room erupts in soft applause. Richard presses his lips together, clearly frustrated but trying not to show it. Barron has just turned the tables, and the audience is starting to see him in a new light. What do you think of Barron's response? Would you have answered differently? Let us know in the comments. Richard Caldwell isn't used to losing control. For years, he's been the one steering conversations, dismantling his guests with precision. But tonight, Barron Trump is proving to be a different kind of opponent. Richard's initial questions haven't shaken him, and the audience is starting to notice. The host leans back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. He's recalibrating, shifting his strategy. If soft questions won't work, he'll go for the jugular. "All right, Barron," Richard says, his tone sharper now. "Let's talk about something more personal. You've grown up in the shadow of one of the most controversial figures in modern history. Do you ever feel like you're living in your father's shadow?" The question is direct, almost brutal. The audience shifts in their seats, sensing the tension rising. This is no longer a polite conversation. It's a battle. Barron doesn't flinch. He meets Richard's gaze head-on, his expression calm but firm. "A shadow only exists if you stand still," he replies. "I choose to keep moving." The audience murmurs, some nodding in approval. Richard's eyes narrow. He wasn't expecting such a confident response. He presses harder. "But let's be honest, your last name opens doors. Do you think you'd be sitting here today if you weren't a Trump?" It's a dangerous question, designed to corner Barron. If he admits to his privilege, he risks sounding entitled. If he denies it, he'll come across as dishonest. The room falls silent, waiting for his response. Barron leans forward slightly, his voice steady. "What is privilege, Richard?" he asks, turning the question back on the host. Is it being born into a family with resources? Or is it the ability to use those resources to make a difference? A name can open doors, but it doesn't walk you through them. The audience erupts in applause. Barron's response is sharp, thoughtful, and unshakable. Richard's smirk falters again. He's starting to realize that Barron isn't just deflecting questions. He's redefining the conversation. Richard takes a deep breath, his mind racing. He needs to regain control. "All right," he says, his voice low and deliberate. "Let's talk about the future. With all the power and influence your family holds, do you feel obligated to follow in your father's footsteps? Do you see yourself entering politics?" The question is loaded, and the audience knows it. If Barron says yes, he'll be seen as following a predetermined path. If he says no, he risks alienating his father's supporters. The pressure is mounting. Barron pauses, his expression thoughtful. "I don't believe a name or a family dictates anyone's future," he says finally. "But I also won't deny that my environment has shaped me. Politics isn't something I avoid, but it's not the only thing that defines me either." The audience is captivated. Barron's words are measured, confident, and deeply personal. He's not just answering questions, he's defining himself on his own terms. What would you do if you were in Barron's position? Would you embrace your family's legacy, or would you try to carve your own path? Let us know in the comments. The atmosphere in the studio is electric. Richard Caldwell can feel the momentum shifting, and he doesn't like it. Barron Trump has deflected every question with ease, turning potential traps into moments of strength. The audience is starting to see Barron not as a pawn in his family's legacy, but as his own person. Richard knows he needs to regain control, fast. He leans forward, his voice dropping to a lower, more deliberate tone. "Barron," he begins, his eyes locking onto the young man's. "Let's talk about something more controversial. Your father has been one of the most polarizing figures in modern history. People either love him or hate him. So I have to ask, have you ever felt ashamed of anything he's said or done? The room falls silent. The question is a landmine. If Barron defends his father, he risks appearing biased. If he criticizes him, he risks alienating his father's supporters. The audience holds its breath, waiting for the explosion. Barron doesn't rush to answer. He sits perfectly still, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the only sound in the room is the faint hum of the studio lights. Then, slowly, he leans forward, his voice calm but firm. Have you ever been ashamed of anything President Biden has said or done? Barron asks, turning the question back on Richard. The audience gasps. Some chuckle nervously, while others exchange stunned glances. Richard blinks, caught off guard. He wasn't expecting Barron to flip the script so effortlessly. This isn't about me, Barron, Richard says quickly, trying to regain his footing. I'm not the one sitting in that chair answering the questions. Barron doesn't back down. His gaze remains steady, his voice unwavering. But you are a journalist, he says, the one posing these questions to make the public think. So tell me, Richard, why is it fair to ask if I'm ashamed of my father, but if I ask you the same about President Biden, it suddenly isn't? The room freezes. Richard presses his lips together, his mind racing for a response. For the first time in the interview, he's the one on the defensive. The audience erupts in applause, some even rising to their feet. Barron has just delivered a knockout punch. Richard takes a deep breath, forcing a smile. All right, he says, his tone lighter but still sharp. Let's talk about something else. Your father has publicly claimed the election was stolen. Do you believe that? It's another loaded question designed to corner Barron. If he says yes, he risks being labeled a conspiracy theorist. If he says no, he risks being seen as disloyal to his father and his supporters. Barron leans back slightly, his expression thoughtful. I think the real question, he says, his voice steady, isn't what I believe. It's whether our system is transparent and trustworthy enough for all Americans to believe in. If half the country believes something is wrong, maybe we should focus on making the system more trustworthy instead of dismissing them. The audience erupts again, this time with genuine admiration. Barron's response is sharp, thoughtful, and unshakable. He's not just answering questions, he's challenging the very framework of the conversation. What do you think of Barron's response? Would you have answered differently? Let us know in the comments. The energy in the studio has shifted. Barron Trump is no longer just a guest answering questions. He's steering the conversation. Richard Caldwell, the seasoned host who's used to being in control, is now scrambling to keep up. The audience can feel it too. They're no longer just watching an interview. They're witnessing a masterclass in composure and wit. Richard leans forward, his voice tight with frustration. All right, Barron, he says, his tone sharper now. Let's cut to the chase. If you don't believe the system is perfect, do you intend to change it? Do you plan to follow in your father's footsteps and step into politics? The question is direct, and the stakes are high. The audience leans in, their eyes darting between Barron and Richard. This is the moment they've been waiting for. The moment Barron will either embrace his family's legacy or reject it. Barron doesn't answer immediately. He takes a deep breath, his piercing blue eyes flickering with thought. The silence stretches, the tension in the room almost unbearable. Then, finally, he speaks. People always ask me if I plan to enter politics, Barron says, his voice slow and deliberate. But maybe the more important question is this. If I do, will people truly want a new generation of leadership? Or will they cling to what's familiar? The room falls silent. Richard blinks, caught off guard. He was expecting a simple yes or no, but Barron has turned the question into something larger, something that forces the audience to reflect on their own expectations. The silence doesn't last long. The audience erupts in applause, some rising to their feet. Barron's words resonate deeply, and for the first time, the audience sees him not as a shadow of his father, but as a leader in his own right. Richard adjusts his posture, rolling back his shoulders. He knows he's losing control, but he's not ready to concede. "You're sharp, Barron," he says, his tone lighter but still edged with challenge. "But let's see how far that sharpness will take you in the next round." Barron lets out a quiet chuckle, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Let's find out," he replies. The audience is on the edge of their seats. They know the real battle is just beginning. What do you think of Barron's approach? Would you have answered the question about politics differently? Let us know in the comments. The tension in the studio is razor sharp. Richard Caldwell knows he's running out of time. Barron Trump has deflected every question, turned every trap into an opportunity, and now the audience is firmly on his side. Richard needs one last devastating question to regain control, and he's determined to deliver it. He leans forward, his eyes narrowing as he locks onto Barron. "All right, Barron," he says, his voice low and deliberate. "Let's talk about leadership. Your father has been criticized time and time again for his blunt words and divisive statements. If you ever became a public figure, would you choose to be as outspoken as him? Or would you take a softer approach, one that pleases more people?" The question is a minefield. If Barron says he'd be just as blunt, he risks being labeled reckless. If he says he'd play it safe, he'll be accused of weakness. The audience holds its breath, waiting for his response. Barron doesn't rush. He closes his eyes for a brief moment, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he opens them, his gaze sharp as steel. "Leadership isn't just about speaking," he says, his voice steady and measured. "It's about understanding. It's about knowing when to speak and when to listen. It's about standing for what you believe in, even when the whole world stands against you." The studio erupts. Some audience members rise to their feet, clapping and nodding in agreement. Others exchange impressed glances, murmuring to one another. Barron's words land with precision, cutting through the tension like a knife. Richard tightens his grip on his notes, his jaw clenched. He knows he's lost this round. Barron has not only answered the question, he's redefined it. The young man sitting across from him is no longer just a guest. He's a force to be reckoned with. Richard exhales, loosening his shoulders. He leans back in his chair, his tone shifting from confrontational to reflective. "Barron," he says, his voice quieter now. "You're very intelligent. I'll give you that. But let's see just how far that intelligence will take you in the next part of this conversation." Barron tilts his head slightly, a small, knowing smile forming on his lips. "Let's find out," he replies. The audience is captivated. They know the battle isn't over, but one thing is clear. Barron Trump is in control. What do you think of Barron's response about leadership? Would you have taken a different approach? Let us know in the comments. The interview is winding down, but the energy in the studio is anything but calm. Barron Trump has not only survived Richard Caldwell's relentless questioning, he's thrived under the pressure. The audience is buzzing, their applause echoing through the room. Even Richard, the seasoned host who's used to having the upper hand, can't help but acknowledge the young man's composure and intelligence. Richard leans back in his chair, his tone shifting from confrontational to reflective. "Barron," he says, his voice calm but filled with a newfound respect. "No matter what people think about the name Trump, I think we can all agree on one thing." He pauses, glancing at the audience before turning back to Barron. "You are not just another political figure's son." The audience erupts into applause once more, some standing, others nodding in quiet acknowledgement. They've just witnessed something extraordinary. A young man who didn't just endure the pressure of a high-stakes interview, but dominated it. Barron Trump has proven himself to be more than a name. He's a person with his own voice, his own thoughts, and his own path. Barron offers a calm but knowing smile. "Thank you," he says simply, his voice steady and confident. The lights begin to dim, the cameras preparing to fade. The interview may be over, but its impact will last far beyond this moment. Barron Trump didn't just hold his ground, he made the entire nation see him in a way they never had before. What do you think Barron's next move should be? Should he enter politics or carve his own path outside of it? Let us know in the comments. As the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice takes over, addressing the audience directly. Tonight, we witnessed a moment that will be talked about for years to come. Barron Trump didn't just survive an intense interview. He redefined what it means to stand firm under pressure. But this story isn't just about Barron, it's about you. Imagine yourself in his position. If you were placed under intense scrutiny, with millions watching your every move, could you stand firm as he did? If someone challenged your identity, your past, your family, would you have the strength to define yourself on your own terms? We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this showdown? If you were Barron, how would you have responded? If you were Richard Caldwell, would you have played the game differently? Join the discussion in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you something to reflect on, an insight, or simply a moment of inspiration, hit the like button to support the channel. If you haven't yet, subscribe now so you won't miss the next story. Stories that don't just entertain, they inspire, they challenge your thinking, they make you see the world from a new perspective. Thank you for being part of this journey. This story was crafted for entertainment and inspiration, designed to spark deep reflections on identity, resilience, and the immense pressure of politics and media. All characters, events, and scenarios depicted in this video are purely fictional and are meant for illustrative purposes only. This video does not intend to misrepresent reality or make any political or personal claims about real-life figures. We respect all viewpoints, political perspectives, and diverse opinions. Healthy discussions are always welcome in the comments as long as they remain respectful. Thank you for watching, and we appreciate your time, your thoughts, and your support. See you in the next video.